After 3 years of working 2 jobs, paying child support for a kid that wasn't mine, now I'm suing my ex and her affair partner for every penny. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and for the past 3 years, I've been living a nightmare I wouldn't wish on anyone. What started as a storybook marriage turned into a betrayal so deep that it still feels surreal. I worked 2 jobs, gave up weekends, and drained myself emotionally and financially, all for a child I believed was mine. But that child wasn't mine, and now I'm fighting to reclaim some of what I lost. It all began when I met my ex-wife. She was radiant, charming, smart, and seemingly everything I could have hoped for. We dated for less than a year before she told me she was pregnant. I was overjoyed. Having grown up in a close-knit family, I'd always dreamed of being a dad. I wanted to do everything right. So, without hesitation, I proposed. We got married in a small ceremony, and life seemed perfect, or so I thought. Things changed quickly after our son was born. My ex stopped working almost immediately, citing the stress of motherhood. At first, I supported her decision. I was working a decent full-time job, and with some belt-tightening, I figured we could make it work. But soon, it became apparent that her idea of belt-tightening didn't include her lifestyle. She was buying designer clothes, dining out with friends, and constantly complaining that I wasn't doing enough to spoil her. To keep the peace, I started taking on extra shifts, sometimes working 60 or 70 hours a week. It was exhausting, but I told myself it was for my family. About 2 years in, cracks started to show. My ex began spending more time out of the house, claiming she needed me time or was catching up with friends. Meanwhile, I noticed she rarely posted pictures of me on social media, though our son was often front and center. Then came the whispers from my family and friends. They told me she'd been making comments about how I was never around and too lazy to show up for family gatherings. It hurt, but I brushed it off. I was too busy working to dwell on it. Then came the night that changed everything. While cleaning the living room after she went out for drinks with the girls, I stumbled upon something that made my heart stop. A receipt from a DNA testing clinic dated months earlier. It was addressed to her. Confused and sick to my stomach, I stayed up all night trying to make sense of it. By morning, I knew I had to find out the truth. The next day, I took time off work and visited the clinic listed on the receipt. I asked if they had records of a test involving my ex-wife. Though they couldn't share her details, they confirmed she had conducted a paternity test earlier that year. That was enough for me. I asked for my own test to determine if I was my son's biological father. The wait for the results felt like a lifetime, but when they finally arrived, my worst fears were confirmed. The child I'd been pouring my heart and soul into wasn't mine. That night, I confronted her. I handed her the results and asked her to explain. At first, she denied everything, but when I pressed, her demeanor shifted. She admitted that she'd been seeing someone else before we got married and wasn't sure whose child it was. But it didn't matter, she said casually. You've been a great dad. Why are you making this a big deal now? I was floored. She saw no issue with the lies, the manipulation, or the fact that she'd essentially built our entire marriage on a foundation of deceit. It was like she didn't understand or care how deeply she'd hurt me. The next few weeks were a blur. I moved out of our home and filed for divorce. My lawyer explained that I could challenge the child support obligation since I was not the biological father. He warned me, however, that success wasn't guaranteed. Courts often prioritize the child's best interests, and even if I wasn't the father, the judge might decide it was unfair to disrupt the child's financial stability. The divorce process was brutal. My ex, true to form, tried to paint me as the villain. She filed for spousal support and even attempted to claim I'd been emotionally abusive. Thankfully, I had documentation, texts, emails, and even voicemails that showed her manipulative behavior. My lawyer was meticulous in presenting this evidence, and the judge quickly saw through her lies. Her request for spousal support was denied, which was a small victory, but it was just the beginning of a much larger fight. The issue of child support was more complicated. My lawyer filed a petition to terminate my obligation, citing the paternity test results. We argued that my ex had knowingly deceived me into believing I was the father, and that continuing to pay child support would constitute further financial harm. My ex's lawyer countered by emphasizing the emotional bond one had with the child. They argued that since I had acted as a father figure for 3 years, I had effectively assumed that role and should continue supporting the child. During the hearings, my ex's entitlement was on full display. She showed no remorse for her actions and even tried to guilt me into continuing to pay. "You've been his dad this whole time," she said in court, her voice dripping with mock sincerity. "He loves you. How can you just abandon him?" Her performance might have swayed someone who didn't know the full story, but I'd long since stopped buying her manipulative tactics. To strengthen our case, my lawyer subpoenaed her financial records. What we found was both shocking and infuriating. Not only had she been receiving child support from me, but she had also been funneling large sums of money to her affair partner. Bank statements showed regular transfers to his account, often labeled as loans or shared expenses. It was clear she'd been using my hard-earned money to support not just herself and the child, but also the man she'd been seeing behind my back. This revelation added weight to our fraud claim. My lawyer argued that my ex's actions were not just unethical, but also illegal. By deceiving me into believing I was the father, she had essentially stolen from me. The judge agreed to hear the fraud claim alongside the child support petition, which was a major win. The affair partner was subpoenaed as well, though he tried to avoid testifying. When he finally appeared in court, his smug attitude was almost unbearable. He admitted he'd known about the deception, but claimed he wasn't responsible for any of it. "She told me you'd never find out," he said with a shrug, as if that excused his complicity. His testimony, combined with the financial records, painted a damning picture of their scheme. As the case progressed, my ex grew increasingly desperate. She started spreading rumors about me, telling mutual friends and even family members that I was abandoning my son and refusing to take responsibility. For a while, some people believed her. I started getting icy stares at family gatherings, and a few friends stopped returning my calls. It was painful, but I refused to let it derail me. I knew the truth would come out eventually. Outside the courtroom, my ex's behavior became even more erratic. She showed up unannounced at my workplace one day, screaming that I was ruining her life. Security had to escort her out, and I filed a restraining order soon after. It was clear she wasn't handling the unraveling of her lies very well, but I couldn't afford to let my guard down. The court case stretched on for months, but I refused to back down. I was fighting for more than just my financial freedom. I was fighting to expose the truth and hold my ex accountable for what she had done. The fraud claim was particularly important to me. My lawyer meticulously presented evidence that showed how my ex had knowingly and deliberately deceived me. From the hidden paternity test results to the financial records showing her payments to the affair partner, the case against her was airtight. When it finally came time for my ex to testify, her arrogance and lack of remorse were staggering. She tried to justify her actions by claiming she had done what was best for the child. She insisted that I should be grateful for the time I spent as a father, even though she had robbed me of the choice to decide that for myself. Her words only reinforced the judge's growing disdain for her behavior. The affair partner's testimony, though less dramatic, was equally damning. He admitted that he had known about the deception and had been benefiting financially from my ex's manipulation. While he tried to minimize his involvement, the evidence painted a clear picture of his complicity. Between his testimony and the financial records, the court had all it needed to see the full scope of their scheme. Finally, the day came for the judge to issue a ruling. In a scathing decision, he called my ex's actions calculated and reprehensible. He ordered her to repay a significant portion of the child support I had paid over the past 3 years. While the court acknowledged that the payments had indirectly benefited the child, it also recognized that they had been obtained through fraud. Additionally, the judge awarded damages for emotional distress, though the amount was modest compared to the financial reimbursement. The affair partner wasn't let off the hook either. The judge ruled that he was partially liable for the damages, given his role in the deception. Though he attempted to evade responsibility by filing for bankruptcy, my lawyer had anticipated this move and had already filed liens against his assets. While recovering the full amount he owed would take time, the ruling sent a clear message that his actions had consequences. Despite the legal victory, my ex didn't take her punishment lying down. She filed an appeal, claiming that the ruling was unfair and that the court had been biased against her. The appeal was dismissed almost immediately, as the evidence against her was overwhelming. Still, her refusal to accept responsibility was a constant reminder of how manipulative and self-serving she truly was. In the meantime, I focused on repairing the damage she had done to my reputation. I carefully documented everything: court records, paternity test results, and even her social media posts defaming me. I used this evidence to set the record straight with friends and family who had been misled by her lies. Slowly, but surely, people began to see the truth. Some even apologized for doubting me, which was a small but meaningful comfort. Amid all the chaos, I decided to take control of my story. I reached out to a local journalist who was interested in cases of paternity fraud. Sharing my experience publicly was both cathartic and empowering. The article gained traction, sparking conversations about the legal and emotional toll of paternity fraud. I started receiving messages from people who had gone through similar experiences, thanking me for speaking out. Knowing that my story was helping others made all the hardship feel slightly more bearable. But even as I started to rebuild my life, my ex continued to find new ways to cause trouble. She attempted to use social media to portray herself as the victim, posting old photos of me with her child and accusing me of abandoning my responsibilities. This was the final straw. With my lawyer's guidance, I filed a defamation lawsuit against her, citing the harm her false statements had caused to my reputation. The defamation lawsuit was the final chapter in my battle for justice. My lawyer presented undeniable evidence of her false claims, including screenshots of her social media posts and the direct impact they had on my personal and professional relationships. The court ruled in my favor, ordering her to issue a public apology and pay additional damages for the harm she had caused. Seeing her admit her wrongdoing in a public forum felt like vindication, not just for me, but for the truth. The judgment wasn't just a legal victory. It was a turning point in my life. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally move on. I quit one of my 2 jobs, reclaiming the free time I had sacrificed for so long. I reconnected with friends and family, rebuilding relationships that had been strained by the lies my ex had spread. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again, and that was enough. Months later, when the dust had settled, my ex sent me a handwritten letter. In it, she apologized for everything: the lies, the manipulation, and the betrayal. She claimed she was ashamed of her actions and asked if we could start fresh for the sake of the child, who she now acknowledged wasn't mine. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the letter to my lawyer, just in case she tried to use it against me in the future. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer her, not after the pain she had caused. The affair partner, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. His financial troubles worsened after losing his job, and he eventually sold off what little assets he had left to pay his share of the damages. The poetic justice wasn't lost on me. Both of them had tried to take advantage of me, and now they were reaping what they had sown. With the settlement money I recovered, I was able to pay off debts and even take a much-needed vacation. For the first time in years, I felt free. I wasn't tied to anyone's lies, manipulations, or financial burdens. I was finally living for myself. The experience taught me hard but valuable lessons about trust, boundaries, and self-respect. I started dating again, but this time, I was much more cautious about who I let into my life. I realized that love isn't just about blind devotion. It's about mutual respect, honesty, and shared values. If someone can't meet you on those terms, they don't deserve a place in your life. As I reflect on everything that happened, I'm struck by how much I've grown. The road to justice wasn't easy, but it was worth every step. I've learned that standing up for yourself is one of the most powerful things you can do, even when it feels impossible. No one has the right to take advantage of your kindness or exploit your love. Today, I'm in a much better place. The legal battles are behind me, my reputation is restored, and I'm finally at peace. If there's one thing I hope others take away from my story, it's this: never underestimate your own strength. No matter how dark things seem, you have the power to fight back and reclaim your life. And to anyone reading this, remember, the truth always comes out, and karma has a way of finding those who try to outrun it.